Welcome to episode 23 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with Perth-based rapper, producer, and engineer Sowdy. We talked about how he learned to produce without tutorials and why he does it the wrong way, why he values using stock plugins as a means to mixing, and why he values his independence as a rapper, producer, and engineer. For all that and heaps more, stay tuned. This is an awesome episode 23 of What's That Sound. Let's go. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of What's That Sound. My name's Stu Watts, and today I'm here with Sowdy. Sowdy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. Nice one. Well, let's kick it off with a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do in the music industry.
So I'm Sowdy, Perth rapper, producer, engineer. Have my own label as well. I guess I started, I've been rapping my whole life. That was kind of the start of things. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really get into the whole producing engineering side until I started to need, beats and engineering. So for a while I was working with a mate, Lucci, but the workload gets big and you kind of just want to record all the time. And kind of have my own sound, I guess, or craft that. So that's when I got into producing. So that was probably 2016, 2017. And then from there, kind of, that's when the engineering stuff came into play. But music's just been my life forever. So
let's take it back to the early days. Like, tell us about where it kind of came into play for you.
So my dad is a vinyl nut. Like, he's got like a collection of 10,000, 15,000 records.
Wow.
And he was a DJ. Or he still does it occasionally on like radio. Does a soul show, but before that he was doing clubs and bars and venues. So I just grew up around a lot of soul music, and then he was also heavy into hip hop, like A Tribe Called Quest and like Beastie Boys and all that stuff.
Yeah, sick.
So like when I was like 2, 3, I'd be listening to that stuff.
That's awesome.
And then it wasn't until I was probably, it's pretty soon after. I think it was 5 or 6, and then I started to get into music myself, like through 50 Cent, and then kind of just went from there. And then been obsessed ever since. Yeah. That's kind of
do you remember listening to the music and kind of noticing any of the like production-y type stuff or how it was made or anything like that? Or was it more just like pure interest in the music?
Not until later. Yeah. So really my focus was the rapping when I first started listening as a kid. I think it was probably around when I became like a teenager, kind of, that's when I started really focusing on the music behind everything. When I started to get into like around 2011, like started to get into Kendrick and everything. That's when I started to really notice all the elements. And even like, I used to listen to a lot of Kanye even as a kid. So I feel like Late Registration was like the first album I heard where I like noticed not just the rapping, but like all the little elements with the music. So that's kind of
that's
but then
awesome.
Ever since then, that's like main focus.
Yeah, for sure. And so what about that sort of music? I know you were kind of surrounded by it, but what about it kind of jumps out to you as being like or captivating or you know what I mean? Like what is it about that style of music?
Because it's like it's very, all my favorite music's kind of in that vein. Like it's either hip hop, R&B, or soul. And I'd like, in terms of like the music, I feel like it's just that bounce, that like the soul behind music is what gets me in.
Yeah.
If it's got like, I don't know, you just feel something good from the production. Like
Yeah.
that's why I've always been heavy into, a lot of sample, like soul sample chops and stuff. Because it
Yeah,
just,
for sure.
it gives you that feeling. And I feel like that's what I look for when I want to hear something,
Yeah.
like something
Yeah,
that brings
definitely.
out that emotion. Yeah.
And so who are some of the producers these days that you go, okay, they're like top tier for me. They're like the ones to kind of emulate.
Well, most of my favorite producers are from that, like 2000s era. So like Dilla,
Sure.
Madlib, Kanye,
Yeah.
um, Alchemist, and then
Mm-hmm.
all like, all the legends. But in terms of like the new kind of wave of hip hop, just Metro Booming's definitely
Yep.
the way he kind of crafts. They're not just like loop beats. That's kind of that's my thing with him. He creates like worlds with his music. So he's
Yeah.
definitely, in terms of like the newest sound, he's definitely one of my biggest influences.
Yeah, fantastic.
But yeah,
So
I can appreciate all sides of the coin with hip hop, like production as well. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's obviously so many different kind of worlds of hip hop that
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
have sprouted, especially in the last 10 years. Before
Yeah,
that,
yeah, it's insane.
before that, I mean, I've listened to hip hop for a long time. I'm not like a wealth of knowledge on it or anything, but I feel like, there's, there were different styles, but they kind of sounded similar, from, I guess,
Yeah,
late 90s to early 2000s, kind of sat in its own world. But then,
yeah.
from like
It was
2010
very
onwards.
East Coast dominated. Like it was the
Mm,
kind of the New York sound was
mm,
pretty prevalent like throughout most hip hop, and now it's like such an international genre
yeah.
now. Like
Yeah.
and it's like such a amalgamation of different genres in one. So I guess like the possibilities of sound are kind of endless with it. That's
Yeah,
how I
yeah,
feel.
100%. It's crazy.
Mm.
Talk us through kind of when you started to learn about production. What did things look like? You said you did it out of necessity. Kind of where did
Yeah.
all that? Talk us through that.
So I didn't have a clue what I was doing, I guess. So I got my mate used Ableton, and I got like a crack version of that.
Hmm.
And I guess I just like tried shit.
Mm,
I as a kid I did drumming, so I've always had that rhythm and understanding
yeah.
of that, but I didn't understand anything like music theory or anything.
Hmm.
I'd never So like most of my early beats were all out of key. Kind of They were just like I was just finding samples and adding drums over it, not really knowing what I was doing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I guess it was a lot of for me it was a lot of trial and error. So I was probably like wasn't until probably like 2-3 years in to like making producing beats and like engineering
Mhm.
myself, I started to kind of get a proper grasp on it because I probably should have, but I wasn't really watching like YouTube tutorials or anything. I was just trying to do
Mm.
it all myself, like trying to
Yeah,
figure it
yeah.
out. And I guess that's kind of worked for me because I've been able to get my own kind of sound in terms of like the engineering side of things and production. Um,
Yeah, well, I feel
so I
like you
guess
can
that's
kind of
kind of
go either way with that. A lot of people, like you
yeah,
said, start off by
100%.
learning straight away from tutorials or going to TAFE and learning from people around them.
Mm,
Whereas when you learn by yourself, you're right. You kind of just experiment and see kind of what works and what
yeah,
doesn't.
it's
And
like yeah.
yeah, it's such a
I
cool way to
also
learn because you kind of you find certain things that other people maybe don't find, and you kind of figure out for yourself truly what you actually like rather than going, oh, I've seen that plugin be used or I've seen someone cut
yeah.
up a sample this way or, and
Yeah,
I'll
well,
just do it that way. Yeah.
that was it. Like the way, because after a while, I realized the way I use the software isn't the way most people use it. Like I do, I kind of chop the samples up in the like. I don't use like the MIDI software or whatever. I
Hmm.
just like
Hmm.
chop them like the actual WAV files or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of a bit of a different technique. But then I saw Kenny Beats, doing one of his streams, and I kind of, the way his workflow is the same as mine. So I guess I figured I'm doing something right with that. But
Yeah, well,
I did go to Whopper for a year to do sound production, but like that was very different than my expectations. It was still great, but I was kind of thinking, I'm going to be in the studio, I'm going to be learning like all that stuff, but it was more so like live, like theater productions or
right,
like
right.
live bands. It was just like live audio engineering, really. But it was still good. I learned a lot in terms of like the tech. That's when I started to learn more about like the technical side of things. But even then, I still kind of just do things like based off my ear rather than, what's meant to happen.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great thing to have that intuition on, like where you want to take a certain song or what something sticks out to you or that drum beat or, that something's wrong with that microphone or anything like that. There's all these little, pieces of the puzzles that we need to be able to actually make music. And so to have an ear for that sort of stuff is integral, and you kind of figuring it out for yourself and learning all those things based off intuition is kind of a strength. Talk us through
Definitely.
what your process looks like these days. Let's start off with producing, and then we'll actually talk more about recording sessions.
Yeah. So producing, really, I just, because I never had like a lot of, in terms of like training to like playing keys or whatever. I look for a sample, and then I kind of chop that up, and then I'll add addition like drums, bass, and then I kind of try to like put in additional production, in terms of just to like kind of mask the sample or make it my own thing, and just make the whole production fuller, I guess.
Yeah.
But so I've got a pretty straightforward like strategy when it comes to producing, and then over time, I find, especially when I'm working on a project, um, I have like the skeleton of a beat for quite a while, and then I'll just play with it over time, and then it becomes like an actual piece of music.
Yeah, nice. And what are you looking for when you're choosing samples?
That's a good question. I guess I look for like a pocket, I guess, like that I can kind of, something that's different, like, and that I can rework into something completely different from what I'm hearing. That's kind of my main thing. I don't want to just, like I have in the past, but I don't want to just use the sample and leave it like
As
that.
is,
I want to warp it. I want to chop it. I want to,
Yep.
because that's kind of what I loved about Dilla so much. Like
Yeah.
he used samples, but you wouldn't even know they were samples. Like he'd make them sound like his own, um,
yeah, instrumental piece or
Is
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what my aim is when looking for a sample, something I can do that with.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then it kind of just goes from there.
Yeah, sick. And talk us through, obviously with the engineering side of things, is there kind of a consistent workflow? Do you record a lot of other artists as well, or is it you primarily just engineering
No,
for
I do
yourself?
record a lot of artists. Like I just do it from my room, like, but people seem to want to come.
Yeah.
So I guess um, like workflow. I kind of, as you probably know, it's from each artist to artist. They have different,
Yeah.
methods to recording. So you just kind of got to kind of adapt to that.
Yeah.
But I just have the session set up and already just bunch of channels, because some artists, they love to stack like crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, the way I record myself is the way I record them. So I keep it pretty simple.
Nice.
I just keep a preset on, and then when they're gone, that's when I can,
Yeah,
do the
exactly.
actual mixing. Yeah.
Yeah. And what have you kind of noticed about working with different people? Is there things that stand out to you that are like commonalities between different artists, or is kind of everyone on their
Mm,
own sort of path?
yeah, I feel a lot are quite different, but there is one consistency. I feel like the earlier sessions, which is understandable, a lot are very, they're like tight and don't really have that. I guess because they just don't know, they don't feel comfortable doing whatever. And then it's kind of like a slog at first for a lot of sessions. But like, I feel like the way I record artists, it's kind of like I have personal relationships with them. So after a while, it's kind of like they feel comfortable. They just come, they try, experiment, whatever. I let them do whatever they want. And then, yeah, so I guess at first, most of them are pretty like, they don't want to experiment. I guess they want to come, they want to smash out a song, and then they want to, but then they kind of realize like it's very by the books. So after a while, I feel like most of the artists I work with kind of just try shit, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it works, it works. Kind of. That's why it's good having just the one-on-one sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk us through, when you're, working with these people, how do you kind of go about fostering those relationships? What do you think has worked for you over time to have long-term relationships with artists?
I feel like it's more so just not like, obviously I keep it professional in the sense of the job I'm doing, but we just talk. We just like talk about music. We like talk about life. Kind of, it's just like a friendship, and then we just do work from there. We'll go get some food when we're having a break, and then it's kind of like, because it's like, when it's like a really casual setting. And a lot of the artists that I do work with, I've like had relationships prior to them coming over, so it's kind of like it's not really like
any
an
different
uptight sort of business. And I'm pretty, I'm pretty chill with it. Like I don't really. I just like, they come. You can, I'm still getting paid either way. You can fuck around if you want. Or you can, so whatever you want to do, you can do. It's your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And talk us through what kind of the difference is for when you're working on your own music. Cause well, let's just mention it. You've just dropped a new album. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's awesome. And you've got a few feature artists on that as well. And, but most of it you've done yourself by the looks of things. I mean, what's the difference between producing your own stuff and then, producing for other artists? Is there a difference or?
I guess producing for myself is a lot more. There's a lot more intent behind it, because I know what I want. Whereas opposed to a lot of artists producing for them, they kind of, from my experience, as we go, they kind of know what sound they want or what direction they want to go in. So I guess, I feel like the way I make my music is I'll sit on it for a really long time, like just to make sure it's kind of, I don't get sick of it. It doesn't go stale. There's not things I can hear like little clips in the audio or whatever. And then that's when I expand on songs. So I guess it's just like I get a lot more time with my own music as opposed to other artists. So it's kind of like a time thing where when they're here, we kind of just got to get work done. But there's not any huge difference. Like I still try to cater to the artist as much as possible as I would cater to myself, and give them those options to just kind of. But I will, like, if the ideas are ridiculous, I will. I try to give the artist as much creative freedom as possible, but sometimes you got to kind of pull them back and just give them suggestions, because a lot of the time, even I was the same before I started producing. You think you know everything, like in terms of your sound as well. But then I guess and they take it well. They listen to my options and
Well, a couple of things have stood out to me so far. One being that you like to, focus on comfort and make people, feel comfortable when they're, recording, and even for yourself, you have to feel comfortable to do your own thing as well. And the other thing is like focusing on making sure things are right. I guess there's not really another way to put it. It's like making sure that you knowing when you're on the right track and when you're not. And the other thing that I love was, you know, you're giving your own music time to sprout, I guess, like, you know,
Yeah.
to come to fruition. You're not rushing things. So yeah, man, I love kind of those aspects of
Yeah.
the
Well,
creation process.
that was a huge kind of, I guess, thing I needed to work on when I first started releasing, because I'd just record, I'd do a quick mix. Like I wasn't as like meticulous with how I did things. I
Mm.
just I just drop it, and I'd drop in heavy quantities.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that time, it wasn't really getting the listeners that it deserved, because it was just so much content at one time.
Yeah. There's
Um,
something to that. I think that's something that
mm,
you need to do at the start. I think it's really
yeah, that's
important
what
that,
I
I think
agree.
it's really important that, you know, artists that are first starting out to get as much time in the recording studio and creating
Mm,
songs and songwriting, and that, like, really focus on just, you know, writing so much stuff that you
mm,
can actually then, when you start to refine your process and get better, you can actually do that quickly and then go, what is an actual, like, what's an idea that's worthy of pursuing here, and what
yeah,
do I actually need to pay my attention to?
yeah, 100%. Because that was pretty much it. Like I was just every day, just smashing out songs, writing non-stop,
Hmm.
producing non-stop, and then I just released like 3, 4 tapes a year, kind of.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, when you listen back on it, you can see like how much progress you have made since those
absolutely. Yeah.
days. So
Yeah,
it is
100%.
good, just in terms of just development as an artist and as a producer, pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
definitely.
definitely wouldn't have done it any other way. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Now, is there anything that you kind of notice during sessions by yourself or with artists that are kind of maybe things that are negative or, you know, uncomfortable? Is there any commonalities that you have found that you've struggled with over the years,
Um,
and how have you overcome that?
hmm. um, I haven't really had, like, I've been pretty lucky. I feel I've, like, a lot of
Mm.
my sessions I've been. I feel like it might be because I do have that. Most of the people I work with, I have a personal relationship with. Like it's more of a limited, clientele that I deal with. Um,
Mm.
but I guess just yeah, I can't really think of anything that
No, that's
negative I
cool.
deal with. Um, Maybe just sometimes, yeah, no.
No, that's cool. I think it's
What
cool
about
because
you? Are there any particular
uh
things that you deal
it,
with?
not necessarily in the recording process. I guess one in the recording
Mm,
process is confidence, and I think it's hard when you're first starting out. You know,
yeah,
if you
that's
come
kind
into a
of.
into a big studio, it's kind of, you know, it can be pretty overwhelming. So what I
Mm,
recommend to artists that are early on in their career and, you know, just kind of getting used to things is just to practice. You know, practice is such a
mm,
huge part of it. The preparation side of recording is huge and it's overlooked. So the more practice that you can have and know your songs back to front,
mm.
then that confidence actually is there when you actually go to record, and you're not second guessing everything. You're not going, oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how do I sing this, or how do I play this? And, you know, it's
Yeah.
for me, it's
That's
preparation and
that's a
recording.
good one,
Yeah.
actually. Because that has happened where they'll come in and they kind of just, it's like they haven't rehearsed, or like, and it's
Hmm.
it's it's different than if you have your own home studio and you can kind of just spend days and days kind of just trying things. But when you're paying for like studio time,
Yeah. But
you
that
need to
comes
come
back
prepared.
to, yeah, absolutely. And that comes back to what you were saying earlier, where you were kind of doing it out of necessity. But what it actually does is it actually does prepare you for when you go into, you know, a recording studio with an engineer or a producer. You know what to look out for. You know the signs of when you're might be struggling, or when you've got writer's
Mm,
block, or when you're not able to do something the way that you want
yeah,
to. You can start to see those signs a little bit earlier. So I always recommend to the artists that I work with is
yeah.
record demos yourself, you know,
That's
spend a
I
lot of
say
time
that
with
all the time
pre-production.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because especially yeah, even just like I appreciate when they send me through demos prior
Mm-hmm.
to the session, so I kind of know what I'm working with, and what they want from the session. Because it's
Yeah.
usually the demos are just they just want an elevated version of
Yeah,
that sounds.
exactly.
So it's kind of like I let them have that creative control with those
Mm-hmm.
demos, and then I'm just there to help make
Yeah,
it sound
yeah.
more polished.
Yeah, beautiful. So, what do you think are some of the things that you've found over time that you've gotten quicker with, and where were the roadblocks initially with things that you know, kind of might have struggled with early on in the production or engineering or anything like that?
Um, Definitely being able to, I guess, adapt to a different voice because when I would do vocal mixing, the only vocals I knew how to mix were mine. Um,
Mm.
so I'd spend just it would drive me insane, trying to trying to figure it out like how to make it sound like right because it would always
Yeah,
sound like I'd kind of use the same frequencies as I would on my voice
sure.
in those early stages because I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, that's definitely the main thing that I've learned, and the difference between mixing a rapper's vocals as
Hmm.
opposed to a singer's vocals are
Hmm.
pretty like they're just different worlds, I guess. And you just got to
Yeah.
treat each voice as a new, uh, yeah, it's something completely new and kind of
Hmm.
going from scratch. I feel.
Yeah.
Um,
So, are there key
as
things that you know, you might have learnt over time to have gotten quicker with that?
I guess I just understanding the voice, I guess, and
Mm.
what needs to be done for, say, a lower voice or a higher voice,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and kind of what they want. Because especially with mixing hip hop, a lot of artists like a very raw sound in terms of
Mm.
their vocals. They don't want it too clean, too like perfectly in the mix. Like a lot of the times they want it just to sound like yeah, I guess it's just each voice is different. That's what I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, like you mentioned, some people want it that more raw demo sort of a
Yeah,
sound, and some
that's
people
and
like a
then
really refined, polished, you
that's
know,
when it comes to
overproduced.
like yeah, when it comes that's what I had most trouble with
Yep.
because I was used to I kept it pretty simplistic, especially with like my vocal chains and everything for myself.
Mm.
I just wanted it the vocals to sound nice and then
Yep.
that's it. I don't want anything
Yeah.
else. But then when I
Yep, just
started working
clean.
with yeah, when I started
Mm.
working with like kind of not more, pop R&B vocalists with which comes with some pitch correction as well. That's when it was a lot more.
Mm.
They care. They're a lot more attention to detail in terms of how clean and how they want to. They know how they want to sound, and even if they don't really know how to explain it, they will
Yeah,
try to explain it, and you just got to kind of try and do it, I guess. And that's what I got better over time.
sure.
Because before it would take me so long to like
Yeah.
kind of get those, but now it's like, all right, I understand what they're trying to
Sure,
say.
yeah.
Just
And that's where
understanding.
referencing comes into play as well. It's like
Oh yeah,
whose voice do you like the sound of? Like how, and then it's
yeah,
just a matter of having a listen and kind of picking out the commonalities between
mm,
different mixes or, you know, different producers or anything like that.
yeah,
Now you do quite a lot of stuff. You know, you're a rapper, a producer, you're doing mixing, you're engineering.
yeah.
How do you organize your time so that you can be the most efficient when you're doing each of those tasks?
Um, I guess, I do try to work to a deadline, but I don't try to force it. That's
Hmm.
kind of how I feel like sometimes I'll get waves where I can smash everything out in a day. Like I have a bunch of jobs, I have my own stuff, and I'll get a whole
Hmm.
album mixed within that day, kind of. Um,
Mm,
and then I just kind of let it happen. And like I've
cool.
never had you know artists kind of complain about that, I guess. So I've
Mm,
kind of stuck to that where I don't force it, but I do try to work as much as possible when
hmm.
I can. Um,
Yep.
even like with my own music, when I'm not feeling it, I still try to do something. Like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
necessarily evolve into a proper song, but I'll just be like searching for samples or just even just like listening to albums and just studying them. I treat that as work.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just always, no matter what, just doing something. And I guess that's how I've kind of had that, being able to keep to a routine with my music
Yeah.
and
I
having
mean, I
that
love it.
discipline.
It's like you know that things need to be done, and you
Mm,
know that you've got to do it whenever you can. And so, whether it's like you said, whether it's mixing, whether it's listening to a track or anything like that,
mm,
it's a matter of going. This is beneficial for me to do it, and however long it takes, then it's going to take that long. But it's the matter of actually putting in the work and getting it done and not straying from that and just
yeah.
yeah, just getting it done.
Yeah. Like, so even for example, sometimes when I get sent stems to like mix vocals, I'll just, even if I'm not going to work it, I'll just get everything set up how I like, get all the
Mm,
stems in. And then I just, even if I don't do any work, it's there and I don't need to do any
yeah,
more. Like it's kind of stuff like that. If I'm not, I just make sure something's getting done. And
yep,
then that just makes the workload lighter. So you're not trying to do everything all at once all the time.
absolutely. It's that compartmentalizing things into different tasks, and you're not challenging your brain to do more than it needs to. And it's multitasking is not a good thing to do for your brain because it complicates things, and it means that you're using your time ineffectively. Because if you are actually wanting to mix something and the vocals aren't chopped up and cleaned up, and the breaths aren't gone when you need them to be
Mm,
gone and stuff like that,
yeah.
actually distracts your brain from the mixing process, which will
Yeah.
result in it, one, taking longer, and two, potentially not sounding as good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
100%.
Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. So talk us through when you're listening to other people's productions, other people's mixes. What is it about certain mixes or productions or, producers that you go, that sounds great to me? What is it when,
Mm,
you're listening to a song and you're like, holy shit, that is awesome.
um, for me, it's when I don't even need to kind of think about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where I can just focus on the music without thinking, oh, those vocals, they're too much high end kind of. If it's
Yep.
just simple and clean, that's when I'm satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love to hear because that way you can just focus on the music. Like that is the job, to make it
Yeah.
sound like, so you don't need to think there's any problems with it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's what I love in a
Yeah,
good
it's cool.
mix.
It's kind of like staying out of the way in a way. It's like
Yeah,
you're doing your job by allowing the everything to just be heard and listened to without any issues.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty much 100% it. Like
Yeah.
if I
And what about
can not,
productions? Oh, sorry. Keep
if
going.
oh, I was just going to say, if I can not pinpoint problems when listening to a
Mm,
track, then that's a perfect mix
mm.
to me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah, and talk us through productions. What is it about a song? For example, you mentioned Metro Boomin before. Like, what is it
yeah.
about a great production where you're
Mm,
like, holy shit, that just works?
for me, it's something that evolves. Like, it's not just you know, same 4 bar loop for a whole song.
Hmm.
If like I can appreciate it if it stays throughout, but I like adding elements,
Mm.
having transitions like throughout
Hmm.
songs, and I'm very into just like building upon it. Like
Hmm.
you can uh, you can see where the beat started and then it ends in a completely different place. That's kind
Mm.
of what I enjoy, and that's why someone like Kanye was such a huge influence, because even if he did use, if he had one soul sample throughout, there'd be additional strings, there'd be like percussive breakdowns. It's not just, it's a production rather than just a beat to rap over.
Absolutely. It's a story in a way. It's like, you're telling a story with music instead of lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's sick. And so, when you are working on a track, like this is a very stupid question in a way, but it's like, how do you know when something's finished? When you go, yep, that's it, it's done, I'm stoked on it.
I guess I use my own music for reference a lot. Songs that are out and that I've been very happy with, and then I'll weigh it up to that in terms of sound quality, engage if it's as engaging. So I guess, and then I just use like the greats, I guess, the artists I grew up on, and if I feel it's, I don't know, you just know, I guess. It's that intuition, like you just know when a song's ready. But even when sometimes 100%. When you think it's ready, you've uploaded it, and then you just hear something when you're playing it back that you didn't pick up on before, and it just drives you insane. But that's I feel like
that's the thing. I was just going to say, it's like that when something stands out to you that pisses you off, just like you're just sitting there like, why is that still annoying me? Like, why?
That's like, because I mixed an album for one of my artists, K the Sovereign, and like it was a hard project to mix because it was kind of his first project before working with me. So he had a bunch of YouTube beats, and there just wasn't much I could do with them because there was no stems. So it was a frustrating one, but like, and so I just kind of just did the best I could with it. And the first, like month or two that the album was out, I was just nitpicking each thing I could have done better. But then I recently listened to it, and then I was just like, fuck, this is so good. Like, after that, when you can stop obsessing over little things you could have tweaked or done differently, and just enjoy it, it's very fulfilling. Like,
absolutely. And I always say, like, it puts you in that like point in time of where you were at the time when you were doing something, and I've talked about it before, is like, I listened back to some stuff from 5-10 years ago, and I'm like, I wouldn't be able to recreate that, but like, that is what it does. It puts you in that time, and it allows you to go, that's where I was at. And, I did vocals differently back then, and I've evolved from that. And it's really cool to feel that as well. And it's good to let go. It's good to let go from something when you finish it as well.
You can't recreate those either. Cause like, even sometimes when I've gone and listened, I was like, oh, I really like how I did the vocals there. And you try to redo it and it just sounds like shit. Like, it's just, you just gotta, because that's what I love about music. But like, that's what gets me with production as well. And artists constantly evolving as they go. Like, obviously they have their blueprint and it's their beat, but when they're not just making the same production over and over, and it's like each project is something entirely new, that's what gets me excited about.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So do you have a favorite thing to work on in a mix? Is it like drums? Is it vocals? What
drums
makes you excited?
It's definitely drums, because that's kind of like what I grew up obsessed with. Like,
cool.
When listening to, like, as a kid, it was always the drums that got me. Like, it needs to be popping, the kick needs to go hard, and then the hi-hats and the snare need to be perfectly placed. That's kind of how I model my drums, like that sort of style. So I always, even when I'm doing, like with I did an album with another producer, Max Martin, and I was rapping on it, and we kind of co-produced the whole album together.
Wait, not Max Martin from Sweden.
No, Max Martin from Perth.
He needs to change his name. That's confusing.
Yeah, it's Macks Martin.
Ah, sweet. That's funny.
So yeah, like, that was, he would mix the samples that he was using, and my focus was on the drums and just fitting the melody stems and everything within the drums. So that's definitely my strongest suit, I feel, and what I enjoy doing most in
Well,
terms of the
yeah.
mixing
listening
process.
listening back to your newest album,
Mm.
it all sits in the same sort of space to me. Like all the songs, it's pretty trappy. Like your older stuff,
Yeah,
there's a lot of more soulful, boom bappy
yeah, it
sort
was
of
a different
stuff. But
sound, definitely a different sound for this album. Yeah.
yeah, and what I want to ask is how do you go about selecting samples, especially drums, because it has to sit within that kind of sonic
Yeah,
landscape, I guess. And so,
yeah.
are you choosing the same samples across different tracks, or is it always completely new? Talk
Um,
us through that.
or they're generally pretty different, but they need to be kind of the same frequencies for me.
Mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
it drives me insane when there's like a kick that's kind of like flat. It
Yeah.
just it doesn't, like a few of those songs on my new album. I had completely different drums for, like, whether it's just a snare or just a kick
Mm-hmm.
or a 808.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get that right and it just sits in like the mix perfectly, that's kind of what I look for. Like I don't try to overproduce it. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
just find the sounds and then slightly tweak it the way it needs to be done.
Yeah,
And
cool.
I feel like that's how my drums, they they pop in the mix a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
how I
that's
get that
awesome.
done. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, let's get nerdy. Let's talk about gear. And first of all, when you're recording, do you have what hardware do you have? Is it just microphones
Yeah.
and
See,
out?
this
Do
is
you have
what
any
trips
outboard
a lot of
gear?
people out. I just have my Rode
Yep.
NT2. I
Yep.
have a MPK Akai 249,
Yep.
and that's it. That's what I
Sick.
make everything on.
Yep.
And then I just pretty much, when it's mixing and stuff, I just use the Ableton stock pretty much the whole time.
Yeah,
And then I'll
wicked.
use, if need be, I'll use the isotope ozone for like mastering or something, like. But I like to, yeah, I don't know. It's just
Just keeping
I've
it
never,
simple.
yeah, well, I've just never, like, because it's all been self-taught. It's all I know, kind of
Hmm.
the way I
Hmm.
do things, and it's worked for me. So I kind of like, I'm obviously always open to suggestions on
Hmm.
and trying new things. But when I have tried those things, it just hasn't sounded like I want it to sound. Like
Mm.
even like isotope, it just didn't hit the same for the way
Mm.
I was mixing my own music and mastering my own music. So I kind of just stuck to that method.
Well, you've gotten results, man. It's clean. Like your mixes are so
Yeah.
clean, and I
Well,
think
that's
that
good.
is
Thank you.
the good thing about stock plugins is they don't
Yeah.
have a lot of like coloring in the EQ and compression and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some. They definitely have some emulations depending on the DAW that you use, but if you're just using the standard compressor, the standard EQs and things like that, you will
Mm.
result in a clean mix. If nothing
Yeah.
else, it won't be complicated. It won't, if you know how to use
Yeah.
the tools. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well, that's
mean,
kind
that's
of like,
awesome.
that's how I like to do it. And then if I want it to be complex, I do that through the actual music instead of the, effects, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
If I want it to be grandiose and like, complex sound, it's more so
Hmm.
with the production side of things instead of the
Yeah.
engineering.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's kind of like my formula for production. But like
Yeah.
sometimes when I like watch actual, professional engineers like do their thing, I'm like, like we do it so different. Like I wish I it would be good if I had, but like I feel like I've come this far with my methods and my
Yeah.
strategies. Like I'm just gonna
Yeah, if it
stick
ain't
to it.
broke, don't fix it. Well, the other
Yeah.
thing to that is like, you can go down rabbit holes. Like I've gone down millions of rabbit holes with plugins and you can
Oh,
spend money and you can spend
yeah.
time and it doesn't necessarily make anything better because better is
Mm,
subjective. It depends on the end result. And if you can get the end result with stock plugins and
mm.
bloody go for it. Like there's
Well,
absolutely nothing
that's
wrong with that.
that's
Yeah.
like some of my favorite engineers, like Guru. He kind of it's just, you don't hear anything, kind of
Yeah.
wild. It's just
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
production and just clean vocals on top, and that's kind of like what I modeled it over. And Alex Toomey,
Yeah.
he's every like the way he mixes beats. It's just so
Hmm.
clean.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
everything sits perfectly. There's not any, crazy reverb or,
Yeah.
like it's not panning like crazy. Like it's just
Yeah.
clean. And that's what I kind of try to do when mixing. Yeah.
I love it. That's
Or
awesome, man.
Ali as well. He's a freak.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Now, what do you think are some of the kind of more difficult things about being a producer, engineer, even an artist? Like, what are the things that stand out to you that you kind of tend to, have troubles with?
Mm. Most of the troubles for me come with not the music side of things or the other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
the business side of things, like, because obviously it's such a huge part.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
for me, I like to be completely independent with my music because I'm doing it all myself. I don't
Yep.
want to give over a percentage to someone else, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
want someone controlling my creative freedom. So that's kind of the biggest challenge for me, whether it be work like producing for another artist or like,
Mm-hmm.
I just like to do it face to face. I like to, yeah, I just like to have creative control of the art. And that's kind of hard sometimes when you're trying to network with other publications, other labels, whatever.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot, yeah. So music, not so much, but just the whole business side of things is where it can get sticky, like sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so how do you get around that then? Like, what are your
Um,
processes for working through that?
I guess it's just a lot of understanding the industry, I guess. At first I didn't know what to do. Kind of, I
Mm-hmm.
was just like falling into the trap of the note. If like, I'll get an email from a label or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I'm like, oh, I'm on, it's time, kind of. And
Yeah.
then you get shown the deal and it's just like, this is not what I want.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like the whole expectation of things and learning that once I kind of accepted that it's in my it's my responsibility, like, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in control of everything that happens. It's a lot more comforting because you just know, like, okay, if I don't put the work in for this, it's not going to go where it needs to go, or I'm not going
Yeah.
to be able to connect the way I want it to connect with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So really,
Mm-hmm.
it's all on me. Obviously, I
Mm.
can source out external people to do things, whether it's PR or um, yeah, marketing, whatever. But I like to
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of that on my own as well. So it's kind
Yeah,
of like
man.
when it's all on you, it's like it's a lot more pressure, but it's also a relief in a way because it's on you. Like you'll get the
Yeah.
job done if you're behind it. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, man. You've got a good work ethic by the sounds of things. It's like, like you said, if it's in your control, you know what you need to do. If you're good at like making lists and, making sure that everything, all the boxes are ticked and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. If you know that you're not good at that, then that's when it is time to find someone else to help
Yeah,
out with it.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a manager. It might
Yeah.
just be a friend who you can talk things through that
Yeah.
understands music maybe more than the average Joe. But yeah, I love it. But the work ethic's huge, man. It's like it won't get done unless you do it. Like at the end of the day, and
Yeah,
I'm a
exactly. It's
freelancer,
all
so
on
I
you.
can totally
Yeah.
relate to that. And if I don't do the work of finishing a mix or booking, sessions or for chasing up clients who haven't gotten me mix notes or something like that, it's like the
Yeah,
job won't get done and I won't get paid at the end of the day. So
exactly. Like
you just got to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely you're a lot more yeah, you just want to get the job done as opposed to if someone's
Yeah.
hiring you, you can kind of fuck around and just see what happens. But when
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all on you, you gotta have a process and you gotta stick to it. Otherwise you'll never get anything done or
Yeah.
get any
Absolutely.
benefits from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that also comes back to what we were talking about before is like, especially if you're in the first 3 years of doing stuff, it's like, just do it all. Just do it all and
Yeah.
see what happens and take notes and keep a journal and, remember what works and what doesn't, because that will help you in the future when you might have a bigger workload of things to do, but you can reflect back and go, I know that I wasn't good at that, or I know that I was really good at that, and that's where I'm going to dedicate my time to it and be
Yeah.
efficient and better at when the time comes that you need to
Yeah.
do it to get paid.
Well, that's what I tell a lot of artists, kind
Yeah.
of, even though it's kind of not beneficial for me, but I let them know you need to get your own setup, like even if it's just a mic and an interface, because you're gonna stunt your growth if you don't have your own kind of space to work on demos or to experiment. Because you just come into the studio and you're just doing it, and then that's it. Like you can't. I don't think you can really like finesse what you want to do if you don't do a lot of that alone time, like refining everything.
Unless you know someone that has a studio and you're over at their house every day, then that's another story. But very few people have that capability. So for sure,
but even then, I feel like
yourself.
it's just like it's integral to just kind of have your own space to do whatever. And I feel like booking a session should kind of be the last piece.
Yeah.
Like in terms of the recording process, like, or, like that's when you've got everything finessed, you're ready to record, and it should just be an easy process from there.
I love it. That's great advice. Now, on that, I like to end the conversations with, your final pieces of advice that you might have. First of all, for producers and engineers, and then to artists. If you have any more advice, you've already given us heaps. So,
for producers and engineers, I guess it's kind of just that whole formula of do what works for you, not trying to do it a right way, because I don't believe there's really a right way. Like I've seen people who don't have a clue how to, like they're geniuses when it comes to the science behind engineering. Like they know everything about the equipment, they know everything about the mics, but they don't actually, they can't make a good mix to save their life. So I guess it's just like you can have all that equipment, but you got to do it your way. Like you can't just try and emulate completely. You can take influence from another engineer or producer, but at the end of the day, it's got to be your own kind of spin on things, in my opinion. And yeah, so I guess it's just not trying to force a particular method or a particular style in mixing, mastering. Just go down your own road, because especially for me, I the way I do it is 100% not the correct way. Like that, like it, the engineering snobs would be disgusted by something like the clipping I get and redlining on some like channels and stuff. They'd think, but like for me, it works, and I feel like, especially in the genre of hip hop, where there's sound, there's not really a constraint on what you bring, like the sound. So
there really isn't.
Nothing's wrong.
If you listen to like A1 hip hop playlist or something, every song sounds completely different.
Yeah. Some songs have the worst mixes I've heard, and they're popular. So like
absolutely, dude.
It doesn't really like, and you see that whole kind of subgenre of the heavily distorted SoundCloud rap where it's just like it hurts your ears, but there's a lane for that as well. So just do whatever you like. Whatever sounds good to you is usually the right way to go.
Yeah, back yourself for sure. And then what about for artists?
For artists, I feel, because I understand the concept of writer's block, but I feel like there's ways around it. I've never personally had it where I'm like, oh, I can't write. Even if you're just, I feel like don't force it, but just try to just always work, because you never know what will happen. Like sometimes when I'm struggling to make something good, I'll just do something. I'll just make a beat and then freestyle a bunch of shit, and it ends up being a hit. Kind of like there's no real. I feel, again, it's kind of like the same with the mixing, mastering. There's no perfect or correct process to get the results. Like sometimes you'll work on a song for years and it comes out, it never formulates into something you're happy with. Whereas something you're like struggling and you just do something random and then it turns into something beautiful. So I feel, just always trying to do something helps a lot with that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
for
Yeah, I
example,
love
even
it.
if I'm not feeling it vocally, I'll just try make something. Like even if you're not
Mm.
a producer, just try do stuff, and you kind of get
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
inspiration from that, or listen to music. Yeah, that's how I
Just
feel.
keep going. Just keep pushing through that initial thought of, oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
can't do
because
this. Yeah.
otherwise you get stuck in a rut, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's harder and harder to get out if you're just kind of you're defeated. Like obviously, I reckon it's definitely important to take time off, like have a life away from music, but
Mm.
also if you kind of get stuck in that mentality of I've got writer's block and I'm just going to try and wait for it to go, you'll
Mm.
never get out of it, because you just like
Just banging your head against the wall. Yeah,
the
for sure.
creative process is weird. Like it just happens. Like, and
And it doesn't, it's
if
different every time as well.
yeah, and if you just deliberately put like a barrier on it, you're not gonna. It's very rare that you just get through it. You just got to
Mm.
keep doing shit, and then you get through it.
100%. Love it. I love it. Well, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for joining me today.
thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Where can people find you?
They can follow me on social, Sowdy Season, SOWDYSZN. I'm on music on Spotify, Apple. My new album,
Yep.
Paint City Purple, is out everywhere.
Nice
Um,
one.
yeah, just
Awesome. Well, I'll
run
have
it
all the
up.
links in the show notes as well, but definitely run it up. It's an awesome project. Congratulations once again.
Cheers. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Um, you're welcome, man. For anyone that has been watching this far, thank you. And as always, if you could do us a favor and share this podcast, whether that's in a DM or on your stories, anywhere that you can share it, it really does go a long way, and it just helps us spread the word about this podcast. We want to get it out to as many people as possible, so every little bit helps. And of course, make sure you hit follow or subscribe on the platform that you are listening to this or watching this on. And that's it for us for today. Thanks again, Sowdy. I'll catch you
Cheers.
soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound? Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.